I'm nervous. I'm like, I might die. What is happening right now? I'm being elevated and I don't know that I'm ready for this. I was often called upon to do things, but I didn't really necessarily know what I was doing. I was just going with my gut. When people hear a story like that, they're like, wow, or you're crazy. I would have never did all that for what you did. I was doing a lot of this. I was doing a lot of flapping, but it was transformational. People don't need perfection. They need your best. We give ourselves reasons for why it's not going to work or why it won't be, it's too hard. I was fortunate to have people around me who allowed me to do those things so that I could be who I am now. I didn't always have a group of fans just celebrating everything I did.
Hi, I'm your host, Reena Suri, and welcome to Thriving Changes. So here's my question. What if leadership didn't start with titles, credentials, or experience, but with borrowed belief? In this episode of Thriving Changes, Gina Watts returns to share the parts of her journey most people never see. The imperfect beginnings, the quiet risks, and the unexpected doors that opened because she chose to step forward anyway. If you've ever wondered how leaders find their voice, how they move through transition, or how they stay grounded when life asks more of them, this one's worth listening to. Let's dive in. Hi, Gina. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, me too. I really enjoyed our last conversation, which typically revolved around you being a teen mom and stepping into leadership roles very early in your career. And I want to, in this episode, dig a little deeper into your leadership journey from how you started. Now, I've known you from the time you became the global director of youth programs at Maxwell Leadership. I was in the crowd when that announcement was made and you were on stage. And so it was great. And then, of course, how it evolved over the years and your most recent transition. Now you have transitioned to the foundation, the Maxwell Foundation, as their vice president of strategy and development for student transformation. So I'm curious to learn more about that transition, how it happened, and of course, your evolution as a leader.
Yeah. Again, Reena, thanks for having me on Thriving Changes. I'm excited to contribute and hopefully my story, or at least parts of it, will bless others. So yeah, I was very fortunate when I became a member of the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team 13 years ago. Actually 13 years ago in a couple of months. I found my community, right? There's a lot of organizations that do leadership development, coaching, training, or speaking, but I was a young faculty member at a university and I was often called upon to do things, but I didn't really necessarily know what I was doing. I always tell people it was just like the grace of God that things didn't burn down because I was just going with my gut. I didn't fully know what I was doing. And especially in higher ed, I shouldn't say it so broadly, but at least in my experience in higher ed, you're given, here's what you're going to teach. Here's your office. That's it. Figure it out. And so I was fortunate to have mentors who trusted me, who invested in me and asked me like my opinion and questions. But being a young faculty member, one without a PhD, so that was already a ding, I was often called upon because I was unafraid. I was fearless. I would try things. I would explore what students needed and what our community needed and would do it. So that being said, I found the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. What I thought I was going to get was I'm going to get some content and I'm going to do some leadership development of my own. And what I found was like a community. And so I've been a part of that community for 13 years. And by nature of my background and what I had done in the community as a social worker, as an educator, I was using my content for the next generation. So there wasn't a fully built out next gen content area or community at the time. And I was just going and using the resources. And so I started going to schools and hosting big assemblies with 300, 400, 1,000 kids and I was using the core content from the certified team to equip young people as leaders. Schools would bring me in as a career coach. They would bring me in as a higher education professional, faculty member. They would bring me in to talk about student success. They would bring me in to talk about futures and what could a future look like if I were a young person in high school. They brought me in because of my own story, right? I was a former teen mom who now was teaching at a major university. And so they brought me in for all those reasons. But at the core of it, I was using that content. So people started paying attention. They were like, "How are you doing that? How are you serving so many young people?" And I was like, to be fair, it's a part of my job. Like I offered, remember, I'm that fearless one. So I offered the university, like I could go and present and serve with our recruiting team. And let's serve the community instead of just going to set up a table and recruit and try to get butts and seats and people in buildings. Let's serve the community. Let's add value to these young people. These schools have tight budgets. They don't have to pay us to do it. We're just going to come in and serve them and add value. And yeah, so that's how it started. And the Maxwell leadership team was paying attention and said, "Can you teach other people how to do that?" I was like, "Sure." So every once in a while, I would do a teaching call. And from there, interest continued to grow. And we found ourselves doing a lot of different things. Everything from a global youth initiative campaign, where at this point in time, we've served over 2 million young people around the world, to creating more content. I had the pleasure of partnering with Nick Vujicic, who is known as an evangelist. But he's in his 40s, but he is from Australia. He doesn't have legs and arms, and he has a powerful message. But I got to partner with him to create new content for the Maxwell leadership team, which he still owes me to write the foreword of my book if I ever write one. He said he would do it. And now there's a whole next gen lane. There's a whole lane devoted to equipping educators and teacher leaders who want to continue serving in education to be stronger leaders, to people who have retired from that community and want to go back and serve in it by equipping them as consultants and coaches, to coaches and speakers and trainers who are like, "I love education. I love next gen. I want to serve those who are caring for our future leaders. How do I do it?" And so now I get to be responsible for that part of our certified team as well. And serving as vice president of part of our nonprofit that focuses on student transformation. We've served millions of young people all over the world, and in particular in the US. We continue to climb year over year. Last year, we served 64% more students than we served the year before. Our schools, our communities are hungry for leadership education, character education for our students. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. And how it evolved, right? From just you taking the initiative, but that's the key, right? Taking
Right.
the initiative. You just took whatever you had and you went with it without giving too much. I think we overthink at times.
We
Oh,
do.
do I have the credibility? Do I have the experience? Do I have this? Do I have that? Or what I don't have? But you just took what you had and you went out and you offered that, and people were ready to dive into it.
Yeah. Can I lean in on that? What you just said, that was so insightful, Rita. I think there's a couple of things that you said there, but one of them is like almost that perfection spirit. It's like we're waiting either for the right time, we're waiting for permission, or we're waiting for it to be a perfect tool or like experience for people. No, people don't need perfection. They need your best, but they don't need perfection. And then I think the other thing too is, we are in a consumer society where we want everything to be microwave ready made. It's I purchased a thing and I can use the thing right now. We don't want to necessarily give effort to make it our own. And even back then, I was just not that person. I was like, "Oh, you don't have really like youth content built out? Okay. All of this stuff can be served to young people. I'm going to take this part, I'm going to change this word to this. Oh, John Maxwell talks about Michael Jordan in this story. I'm going to change that and it's going to be LeBron, or it's going to be like it."
Just be more creative about it.
Yeah.
Add
Or I don't understand basketball, I'm going to change it to soccer, or I'm going to, whatever it is. I think sometimes, though, we give ourselves reasons for why it's not going to work or why it won't be, it's too hard. And I'm grateful that I did so many things as a young leader, and that I was fortunate to have people around me who allowed me to do those things so that I could be who I am now. Because yeah, I don't know at 45 if I have the same energy. I definitely have joy. I'm definitely excited for the next things. But I think at some point, sometimes you also are like, I don't know if I have energy to be risky with and being fearless. But I do think at any age, you can be fearless. You can try new things.
Yeah, there's a
Doors
couple of
open.
things that you've said which are really resonating. And just to add on to it,
Yeah.
when you mentioned that imperfection moment, that we look for that. In my experience, as far as my speaking goes, or my coaching or training goes,
Yeah.
some of the most powerful moments have been those imperfection moments
Yep.
when
Yep.
I've just gone in shaky, vulnerable, and I've just been my honest self. And it was an invitation for others to be just that. And we did it together. It became a partnership rather than me being an authoritarian trying to teach them something. And
Completely.
that's where the magic lied, the magic in the process. And I just love that. And you also said that you found that community. It's so important to have those people around you who allow you to fail, who celebrate with you when you fail, and they accept you. And they're not there as teachers or guides or whatever, but they're just there that, hey, you'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yep.
It's okay.
And sometimes for people that are watching this or listening to this and they're like, I don't have that type of community. If you use that as an excuse, you're going to close doors that were meant for you to walk through. I didn't always have that. And I didn't always have a group of fans like just celebrating everything I did. I made a lot of mistakes, and I also probably upset a few people, either because I was misunderstood or because they wanted what I had or what they thought I had, or because they just didn't get it. They just didn't get it. Like, why? I don't understand you.
Yeah.
The reality is that, like you said, it's in those vulnerable moments, it's in the times where we have a shared experience that people feel seen and known. And you're feeling seen and known, but they're also feeling seen and known. I tell folks all the time when I'm teaching and equipping them in building their own business or serving others, I'm like, people buy or they say yes to the person, not to the product.
It's always the person.
It's always the person. I've used a million different tools, products, resources over the years, and the people who stay connected to me and sticky to me are those who just they jive with me. Like
Yeah.
it's a thing. Like they like how my approach, and they appreciate the ways that we can work together.
They will come
So,
back to you because of that also.
yeah.
They become your lifelong customers, if I can
Yeah.
use that term,
Yeah.
or clients. But it's always the people. People don't quit organizations, people
Yeah.
quit leaders.
People. Yeah, for
It,
sure.
and it's so true. I know that I've stuck around in certain situations, even if it doesn't pay, it's not paying very well, or it's taking too much of my time. But it's the people who
Mhm.
have been there, or they've supported, or they need it, but they're good people and they value what they're getting. It's always the people. And
Yes.
oh,
Totally.
that's so wonderful. So then you were in that position for how many years?
So well, let me back up a little bit. While all of that was happening, I didn't become a full-time member of the staff until last year. So people are always like, dang, you've been there a long time. Yes, but first as a member, then as somebody serving as a volunteer. Then I moved into contract roles, like when I started developing content with Nick Vujicic, and then became a faculty member. They started to formalize processes for people to teach and to add value to the coaches. And then I was basically the only one doing the youth stuff. So they were like, okay, technically I made up my own title, global director, but at that time, but it was to name what I was doing. And then now have moved into vice president and
With the
transformation
foundation.
with the foundation.
But so you
So
were never employed with the Maxwell leadership? It was always contractual work? All right.
It was volunteer and then it was contract work. And sometimes when people hear a story like that, they're like, "Wow, that's like a lot of faith that you've had," or "You're crazy. I would have never did all that for what you did." Well, here's the thing. I was doing what I felt called to do. So it was 100% connected to calling. Second, the organization at that time was not focused on the next gen. They did not feel a calling to it. It wasn't a part of their mission. Their work was to develop leaders, to add value to leaders who multiply value to others. And that still continues to be the mission, but it was focused on adults.
Adults, yeah.
So I was a weirdo. I was like an added benefit, but also something they didn't plan for. Now we are in a season where we are putting more into the next generation than ever before and creating space for the next gen as well as resources for adults who care for and want to serve the next gen. So it's also cool. Some of the things too, I think I talked a little bit earlier about us being in a consumer society. A part of being a consumer society, you always move on to the next thing pretty quickly. I think that one of the things that we can do better as leaders is show people how sometimes faithfulness and loyalty and seeing a thing through can also produce great fruit. And so while there were many times where I was like, I don't know if we're going to keep doing this, not because of a calling thing as much as of I don't know if it was a fit for where they were going at the time. And it's turned into full-time work. And I'm completely devoted and dedicated to this work. All along that process, I was always working somewhere else, sometimes two or three times. When I became a member, I was teaching full time at a university and also had administrative appointments. So at that university, I became a student. I helped to launch a student success center. It was like my swan song before I left, but I also was teaching a full load and serving there. And then when I relocated to Ohio, I then started working at a church and I still was doing both, doing the Maxwell work and doing the work at the church. And yeah, so this is the first time actually at the age of 45, almost 46. This is the first time in probably 25 years that I am only working one job. I've always worked two or three jobs. One came out of just hustle. I just hustle. And also came out of I like it, right? And people would often wonder, then who was raising your kid? I was raising my kid. We had a rhythm, we had a schedule, we did things intentionally, served each other really well as our family supporting. I didn't raise him on my own, but also there wasn't somebody else raising him and I wasn't like a part-time pretend mom. I was mom. I was full-time mom. I was present mom. Yeah, it's just you just think of ways to do it. So I wasn't saying yes to projects that made me work 80-hour weeks. I wasn't doing that. I was doing things like, oh, at Christmas time, I'm going to work at Bath and Body Works because guess what? That pays for Christmas, right? And it's candles and soap. And while it's important and I love it, I also am not writing content, grading papers, or
Yeah.
thinking about community development and the other work I'm doing. I get to spend time with people talking about soap and candles. And I loved it. I did it for 14 years. I did it in two states, two cities, 14 years, and it was wonderful. And people to this day still ask me about the specific notes in certain scents of Bath and Body Works. You
Now
know,
I know who to go to.
now you know. Now
Now
you
I
know.
know.
So, but like now in this season, being able to focus really intentionally my time and my energy on a thing, which is equipping and developing the next generation, not to lead tomorrow, but to lead today. And that looks like serving and walking with educators and those who care about the next generation. And it looks like walking slowly through the crowd with the next generation and helping them to see who they are, who they're called to be, and that they have everything they need within them to lead well. Yeah.
But they're smart kids. I'm in higher ed.
Yeah.
Some of these kids are amazing.
Yes.
And was there a time when you hopped into, when you were doing work with the certification, was there a time that really stretched you or that it made you think that, hey, can I do this? That you
Yes.
question yourself or your ability? Because that was large scale work.
And I still do some work for them because we're a whole enterprise. I was going to joke and say, yeah, actually, yesterday. But also, I'll give you an example of that earlier in my career and experience with Maxwell. So, this is after I'm being paid as a contractor, but I've only done one contract with them. I did like a project with them. I created some content with Nick Vujicic, and now I'm just helping out. And like if people call and say, hey, I like youth stuff, and they're like, oh, you should probably call Gina. That's all I'm doing. So our CEO at the time calls me and he's, Gina, I have an idea. And it was always dangerous for him to do that. But, anyways, calls, says he has an idea. He's like, what if we take this content? I feel like the sales of the content that you made have been phenomenal. What if we equip and deploy coaches to do a free youth event in their communities all over the world? What do you think about that? And we just do a campaign. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, but that's the thought. And I was like, that would be great. So that's all he says. And then he's like, by this date, so it was December 1st, because for whatever reason, 3 years in a row, he would call me on December 1st with an idea. I was like, is my name on your calendar for December 1st? So December 1st, the year before, he calls me and says, January 11th, you're going to go to California and record content with Nick Vujicic. Create a plan, create the content, and then we're going to record it. Okay. So I had a month. Plus Christmas is in there. Plus I'm still working a full-time job at a university. The next year, he calls and does the same thing, and it's about this campaign. I start to think, he gives me a thinking partner and she's helpful, but she's thinking more of like branding. I'm like trying to think of how do I deploy people, right? He says, so, okay, come back. What are we doing? What are we doing? Or, how many young people do you think we can serve? And I'm like, well, if we have like about 25,000 members, I don't know that they're all engaged. What if we do like maybe 5,000 students can be served? Because if everybody says yes and they serve, like I had a whole math equation. I was nerding out on the numbers. So I was like, if we have this many members and they serve this many students, this is what I think we can do. He had a very good way of encouraging you and pushing you. So he's like, that's great, Gina. Like always complimentary, always encouraging. It's great. I love that. Okay, what are we naming it? I think we can call it the Global Youth Initiative. Wonderful. All right, we're going to do it for 1 week. 1 week, we're going to ask all the coaches to say yes and serve young people around the world. And our goal is going to be, you said 5,000. Okay. All right. So we get on a call, and I might be misremembering the numbers, but the numbers are that kind of level, right? We get on a call and it's the launch call. So in the meantime, from the time he asked me till the time of implementation, again, it's probably like January 15th. It's like a very short window of time. So we have branding, we have all of this stuff, and I have to have branding for it. We're building a platform so that we can see where people are at in the world doing a youth event. I have to have content to teach them from January 15th up until the first week of April. And I have no team. I have nothing. I have this one thinking partner that's like talking to me about branding. So we're on the call and he says, Gina, I know you're so excited. Now there's hundreds of people on the call because anytime he hosted a call and it was a brand new thing, hundreds of people joined the call. So I'm nervous. I'm like, I might die. What is happening right now? I'm being elevated and I don't know that I'm ready for this. And I just did this thing so I could be a better leader. And what is happening to my life? So on the call, he says, all right, we're going to serve 50,000 people. And I was like, I think you mean 5. And he's like, we're going to serve 50,000 people this week in April. Great, let's go. Hangs up the call. I was like, okay, okay. And I remember feeling, and now mind you, I'm already moved to Ohio. So I'm at a church conference about church security in Memphis, Tennessee, in the lobby doing this launch call. And this is what he says. So I also hang up the phone and go back to this church security conference where we're going through the church with like demonstration of like how to like keep everybody safe if there was like somebody to enter the building, and I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? And that's so typical of my life. I like hang up, put that down, and then, okay, so I have to have 50,000 students served. Now I have to go figure out how to secure our church because now that's a part of my job. And we served almost 100,000 that first year in 1 week. That's just borrowed belief, right? Like he knew how to inspire, he knew how to encourage you to build your wings on the way
Yeah.
down or up. I don't
Yeah.
know. I was doing a lot of this. I was doing a lot
Yeah.
of flapping, but it was transformational. He helped to transform my life and transform how I thought about myself.
Yeah.
And so in turn, it's one of those legacy building ripple effects, right? It's he did that for me, which in turn is a ripple effect to 100,000 young people around the world
Yeah.
who received free leadership development over 1 week in April of 2017, which has now turned into over 2 million.
It's unbelievable at times, right? That how just
Mhm.
in 1 week, with barely any structure in place, what can transpire in that little window that you
Yeah.
had.
Your desire to say yes can be transformational, not only for you, but for people you may never ever meet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goes back to our initial conversation that we just need to say yes, start somewhere, even if we are not ready.
Mhm.
Let's not just wait for us to become perfect or get this certification or get that
Yeah.
education or that experience. But
Yeah.
we can start somewhere
Yeah.
and we never know how it's going to evolve.
Mhm.
What an inspiring story.
I even saying it now, I got goosebumps. I was like, "Oh, that happened to me though." But still, like even I tell the story probably twice a year cuz now the Global Youth Initiative has become a campaign that we've done since 2017. We're in our ninth year, and we do it every April and every October, and we now do a whole month each time. But yeah, over 2 million young people around the world have been served, and all it's taking is leaders saying yes to serve for free and equip young people with leadership tools that they should have access to.
Yeah.
So,
And what they can do beyond that, right? We are empowering them. It's the ripple effect. Somebody
yeah,
did it for you, you did it for somebody, and now
yeah,
they can do it for others.
yeah,
What an
yep,
amazing story. How did your role with the foundation, how did that conversation begin? And
yeah. It was my executive vice president. He'll probably watch this and be like, "Yeah, they should let me tell it." He was so patient and caring to me through the process. So I was working full time at the church, and I had over several years navigated multiple transitions in serving our church, but ultimately became the executive director over our community center, as well as held all of the missional outreach arm of the church. So anything that touched the community. And at one point, they were like anywhere, I think at the highest, as far as the biggest we were, there might have been 20 ministries that were under my responsibility. Some were seasonal, but some were all the time. And then when I transitioned off staff, there was closer to 13 to 15. But, anyways, everything from a licensed childcare center to an after school program to a summer program to an in school program to a health clinic that provide free health services to a food pantry with multiple locations to a ministry that served women who found themselves in crisis pregnancy, to you name it, we probably did it. Immigration counseling, there was an attorney on staff who was helping people with their citizenship, and all of these classes, events, anything you can think of a church could do to serve the community, it came by way of the team that I led. And so I was satisfied in the sense of I felt called to do that. I felt very much I had clarity and purpose about what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to lead. I just felt so privileged to be able to serve in that space. And then this explosion of interest in next gen was also happening alongside that in Maxwell. And they were hiring a new leader to come in and do some work, and they wanted to unify the efforts that were happening in the foundation with what was happening in our for profit. And I'll be very honest. I was like, I don't know what this means. And I don't know that there's space for me in it. Right. Because if you're already hiring somebody else from the outside, you're not looking at me as in a way to take on that role. And sometimes, for those of you listening, there's decisions made in a leadership space that you don't have privilege to be a part of, and you're just unsure of what direction those decisions will go or the impact of those decisions. And so I began to prepare myself to exit, because I was like, if they're hiring somebody to unify the work, I've done the work to serve people well, to be present well, to create content, to create systems. Let me equip the people who are also walking with me to hold this and help them to be aligned with where we're going. And that's what I did. So for honestly 2 years, I was just preparing my exit and handing off things. And also, that's like a little nugget about legacy. Even the work that I was doing at the church, I was always replacing myself. My very first meeting at the church with the team in 2016, I remember in a team meeting, the very first thing I said to them, is the work you're doing going to live beyond you, or does it only live because of you? And it was something I actually had heard John say, and I didn't realize how deep in my spirit that was, that it just came out. And the reason why it came up is because we were talking about volunteers, and there wasn't enough volunteers at the time to do some of the ministries that we were working on. And I was like, it feels like we're holding it closely as a staff, but we're not equipping people to be able to do the ministry outside of our hold. And so I just have always had this posture of replacing myself, always. So if I'm doing a thing, I'm bringing people along with me to do that thing. Because for whatever reason, whether it's just time for me to transition, whether it's a pivot in the organization, or God forbid, I no longer am on this earth, somebody needs to know how to do the thing if it's to continue. And so I was planning my transition, and then I was approached by the person that they hired, who is now my senior leader. And he was just like, I think we have a space for you. And I had just never, ever thought about it. And they walked with me incredibly well to transition off of staff at the church and then to move into a full time role with them, to allow me to leave. But honestly, in all my spaces of life, I had always been like replacing myself in all the spaces I was in, whether it was in the for profit with the certified team on the Maxwell side, or whether it was the work I was doing in the church. People didn't miss a beat.
I just want to clarify something, that you said that you were preparing yourself to transition.
Mm-hmm.
So were you preparing yourself to transition from the church, or were you preparing to transition from the Maxwell,
The certified team.
the
because
certified team?
because I wasn't in rooms where the decisions were being made. Obviously, that wasn't my place or my purpose, but I was trying to interpret what was happening. And so for me, it was like, if you're hiring somebody to come in and unify everyone and create this next gen experience for the enterprise, but it's going to live in the foundation, I've probably done what I've been called to
Well,
do. Let me
all right.
exit and transition
Well,
well.
so now the Maxwell leadership doesn't do the youth program. Everything is done by the
No, they
foundation.
still do the youth programs. I
Okay.
am now what we call the human bridge.
Okay.
So I serve in both spaces as a way to bridge the community so that the ecosystem works for itself. So we still have all of our, like, I just actually launched a new certification with our team in the fall of last year, and then we're launching another one this year, and I'm still serving as vice president in the foundation side.
So
Yeah.
you said in our previous conversation, one of our conversations, that it was a 2-year process
Yeah.
for you to decide that decision. So what was that wrestle?
Yeah, I think especially when you're someone who really wants to pursue what God has for you, and you believe you're doing something out of calling and not just out of, I'm good at it and I'm going to keep doing it, or I'm good at it because I like to sniff candles and sell soap. Like, when you're doing something out of a calling, the amount of energy it put in for you to say yes to a thing, you should give equal energy to say no or transition out of it. And honestly, before I was even asked to consider a role, I was already feeling prickly, as I would call it. I was feeling prickly about my work at the church. and feeling like I've done what I was called to do. It is now time to formally start to replace myself. And I started to do small things and then bigger things, and then name it to my senior leadership team that, like, hey, this is what I'm feeling and here's what I'm experiencing. This is what I need from you to support me in this. And so it started with like just a prickliness. Like, I can't name it better than that. It was just an awareness. It was a knowing that I had done what I was called to do. And now it was time to allow somebody else to step in. I think one of the things, I am somebody who, if you study Strength Finder or strengths based leadership at all, one of my highest strengths is responsibility. I can be hyper responsible. Some of that I think is being an eldest daughter. For all, shout out to all my eldest daughters out there, but it's just being hyper responsible for things. So I know that I have to intentionally work to delegate and to invite people into owning a thing with me. And once I started doing that, I was like, oh, this is what handoff looks like. This is what that legacy building looks like. And I knew how to hire people that I needed, not necessarily who were me. So I was always surrounding myself with people that made me whole and made my leadership better. But then it came time to truly replace me. So, like, we had the systems in place that if I was going to be out for a month, for 2 weeks, for 3 months, whatever, everything's going to run. That was never a problem on both sides, whether it was I was doing Maxwell work or I was doing the church work. But what I didn't have was necessarily named people to take on those things. And that was a part of that process as well. But the prickliness was more of, Lord, I don't necessarily want to leave. I love what I do. I think I actually finally just got it right. Why are you going to make me stop? But it was a similar experience that I had with the university. Even though I was leaving to go marry my husband, before I even had met him, I had started to feel this like prickliness. And honestly, it gave me my best ideas, which were connected to the Student Success Center. And then that ended up being the last thing I was able to deliver. So it's sitting quietly long enough to hear what it is that you're supposed to be doing and then taking action on that. And sometimes it might take 2 years, and sometimes it might be more swift.
That discernment is important because you need to know that whatever decision, whether it works out or not, that's secondary.
Yeah.
But in that moment, whatever you decide, you need to be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That, you know, that wherever I am right now, this is the best way
Mm-hmm.
forward. So, were you sharing these thoughts with somebody, or what was your support system like, or was it all you were just dealing with it all on your own?
Yeah, it had seasons. So I would say the first probably 6 months of it, from the initial prickliness till I started speaking with someone, was in solitude. And I actually think that's important. Sometimes, again, society is share everything, talk about everything. You need to be in community with people, not for everything. Sometimes you just need to sit still and be quiet. And you need to hear from the Lord. Like for me, it's from the Lord. I needed to be quiet to hear his voice, not give the microphone and hear everybody else's. So I was quiet. I was quiet. I was pensive. I was praying. I was really seeking him to hear from him. Then I pursued community. So then I was going to spiritual direction. And then I also became a part of a group with Christine Kane called Propel. And what I was looking for was like that space where I had a person who wasn't my husband, who wasn't my mother, who wasn't my brother, who wasn't my best friend, that I could say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Because all of those people love me, but all of those people have a perspective that's still personal. I needed to talk to somebody objectively. Here's the word vomit of my life. Help me make sense of this.
And they're attached also to you. No, there's attachment. They're too close to it, and so are you. You need somebody absolutely unbiased, unattached to that whole thing to help you discover.
Yeah. And you need people who can be objective, but also know that there's a particular lens from which you look at things and how you want to live your life. So I also pursued spaces. I've been a previously practicing counselor. My background's in social work, so I value therapeutic practices. I value counseling. But when I'm pursuing those spaces, I'm pursuing somebody who knows that my faith is the lens by which I'm going to operate in first. So if you can't hold that space with me, then I can't come to you within this moment. And I think sometimes people pick up a phone or look in a directory and just find whatever that the people have to be aligned with how you believe and what lens you're operating through. They can still be objective, but they have to lead with that first. And so then after I did those two experiences, I also had an executive coach. And that executive coach was somebody who believes in the same faith that I do, that understands the lens in which I operate my life. And so having that community around me, plus my family and close friends, really helped me to become settled in not just the decision, but also the pursuit of that. That was a part of the pursuit of what God had for us.
Yeah, something which is coming throughout your journey. We did touch on it in the beginning as well, that you said something to the effect that if anybody says that we don't have community, that we don't have connections, we don't have whatever story that we're telling ourselves, you've intentionally gone and created that community for you. We need
Mm-hmm.
to step out and
Mm-hmm.
create that community. Nobody is going to come to your door, to your home, and ring a doorbell and say, "Hey, I'm your community, and talk to me."
Yeah. And the other part of that too is sometimes you're surrounded by a lot of people, but they're not your community.
They're not your
So
community.
I learned that lesson when I was a younger faculty member at the university I taught at. I had an amazing experience. I was very loved upon, cared for, led well, but not everything was golden. Like not everything was coming up roses. And I remember there was a moment where we were going through a leadership transition, and I was teaching at the university that I was once a student at. And it just hit me. I realized that part of why I wasn't being respected, I kept telling myself it was because I didn't have a PhD. Part of why I wasn't being, or that I was young. What hit me, and I actually said it out loud in a room to them, was my colleagues couldn't respect me because I was once their student and now I'm their peer. And so some of them couldn't overcome that. And so it was creating this gap, and I'm like passionately pursuing a relationship with them, and I'm wondering why when I'm in your classroom you told me I could be anything I could possibly think of, and they believed in me, and I borrowed their belief for my own life. But once I became their peer, it didn't translate. And I remember saying that in a room full of my peers who were once my educators, my faculty members, and a couple of them came and apologized to me and said that's actually the language they needed to hear to be held accountable. But I say that to say that I still had an amazing experience. I still think of that community often. I have gone back and been a member of the advisory board there. I love that community. I'm deeply passionate about that community. And it can also be true that they were not my community at some point, or that not everybody was for me. Sometimes we find ourselves in spaces where there's people, but not community. And you have to be very clear, like social media. Those are people,
People, but
not always are they your community. And you have to be very clear about who is what.
yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying. But sometimes going back to your university experience with your colleagues, and many times they don't even realize what they're doing, or
No.
they
No.
it's completely in their blind spot, because
Yep.
I've had similar experience. And most often it needs to be you to have
Yeah.
that courage too, because somebody else doing your talking for you doesn't work.
No, not at all. And I told them, I was like, I didn't change. It didn't change how I treated them, nor like before or after. I was still Gina because I know who I am. I know who I am, and I'm going to be who I am. And I am somebody who is highly responsible, sometimes too much. I love deeply. I hold accountabilities, and I want to live my life with integrity. I want to walk it out well. And so that never changed. But that moment helped change the trajectory of like my relationship with them, and then our community, right?
Yes.
It then they actually were community with me.
Yeah. Having that difficult conversation can pave the way for How it's done is important, of course,
Mhm.
with respect, with love, with kindness.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but it's important to have that conversation,
Mhm.
because it opens doors.
It does. It
It
does.
builds bridges. And so quickly, tell me, in this new chapter, in this new role, what new is evolving for you? Do you see your leadership or the work that you're contributing differently
Yeah.
from what you were doing previously, or in the church, or especially with the certification program? And
Yeah.
is a new meaning evolving through this?
So a couple of things. One is some folks, because I still go to the church that I used to work at. Some folks will say, "Oh, how's your new role?" or they'll say, "Is the grass greener?" And I always tell people, I was like, "I'm just in a different yard." So one, I think perspective is that I've been fortunate to be able to use my same skill sets that made me successful in other spaces in this new space. I also get to learn new things. I'm a person who likes to learn. My grandmother, my dad's mom, I remember she was one of the ones who she just didn't understand me in many ways, but especially after I had Christian and then went on to earn two master's degrees. She came to one of my graduate degree graduations. And there's a picture I have of her and I. I went to the University of Pittsburgh and we're outside of one of the main auditoriums there off of Forbes Avenue, and she's holding my hand. And I remember every time I look at that picture, because she said to me right before my mom took it, she said, "You really like to learn. You really like learning." And I wanted to tell her, "Yeah, kinda. Also, I need to get these degrees to make some money in this nonprofit work I picked." But, it is true though. She was right. Like I love to learn. And so being challenged and having healthy challenges help me. So I'm grateful that I get to learn new things and I also get to evolve as a leader in this space. I also think I don't like change just for sake of change. I lean into change. I am somebody who is a non anxious presence. I am the person who will, that's when my responsibility is good for an organization or for a team, because I see anxiety and I'm like, let's all get together so that we don't have to have anxiety. Like, anxiety doesn't have to enter this conversation. So, how can we walk well together through change? So, I think I navigate change well, but I don't like change for the sake of change. So, I do think that's a part of it. And then I think one of the things in my evolution as far as a reflection that I've had over the last couple of years as a woman, as formerly a young woman, and as a woman of color, I often thought that I can't say no to opportunities or that I can't leave opportunities because who's going to be able to do it again? If I mess up this opportunity, are they going to take a chance on any other woman or any other woman of color or any other young leader if I'm the one that messes it up? Right. So that's a high responsibility in me. And while in some situations that could be completely true, that somebody's going to judge a whole body of people based off of how I perform, I, one, can't control that. It's not mine to own. And two, I need to lean into what God is calling me to do. And holy indifference has been one of my words, one of my focus for my life is how do I passionately pursue what God is calling me to do? Meaning, like, my yeses are towards what He wants for me, and my nos are towards what He wants for me. And that has allowed me to evolve as a leader and to know that responsibility is something that He gave me, but ultimately I have to release the consequences of my obedience up to Him.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so lovely and so insightful. Is there a new meaning to the youth that you're serving? Is there a difference from what you did prior to what you're doing now? And is it bringing a different body of work?
I think anytime you're focused on the next gen, your work has to evolve to meet their needs because it's not about what you think, it's about what they value. So I think that's the ways may evolved, but I think the values, the principles do not change. The values and the principles do not change. The
That's
ways we
so
get
important.
there, the
Yeah.
ways that we serve them, the ways that I communicate with them, the ways that I connect with them may change.
It's good in a way that that change might be good, because We are evolving to meet the needs of the current generation and the times that we are serving. But staying grounded in your values and in your mission, your purpose, because if that shifts or if you're misaligned, then there's an issue. All right. How do you look back at it all?
With gratitude, with deep gratitude. This past holiday season was the first one that my mom in particular, our family as a whole, but I was looking at it through the lens of my mom. Her sister had passed away this past May, and so this was the first holiday season without her sister. And while gratitude is the first thing I think of, I also think of life in general. A great way to experience life is through two lenses of gratitude and grief, right? And it's like you grieve what maybe was lost, whether it's opportunities, whether it's time, whether it's people, right? You grieve that, and you have to grieve it because you need to name it. Because if you don't name it, it eats away at you
Yeah.
and you don't hold space for it. But then you also have gratitude. You have gratitude for what you've done, what you've experienced, what has happened by way of you or through you, what has been done for people around you. And I think when I look back at my life, I don't look back with any regret, but I do hold those two very precious things of gratitude and grief.
My last question is, if there is somebody who's listening to
Yeah.
us and who's wrestling with a decision or a choice, like
Yeah.
how you said, that prickly moment of which direction to go, what would be your parting thought to them or
Yeah.
advice?
I think first is to not be afraid of solitude and silence. You have to quiet the noise around you and the noise within you to hear what you're supposed to do. And in a community and society where it's constant noise, you have to not be afraid of solitude and silence. Second, I would say that after you do that and spend time quietly, not 20 minutes, like longer than that. It might be days or months, but then you find somebody who is aligned and looks through life with the lens that you do. And when I mean lens, I mean like if it's a faith lens or if they are somebody who has what you have and you aspire to have that. You want somebody who's either been there or going where you're going, like they're at where you're going. That's how you grow. And then the third thing I would say is just community. You surround yourselves with people who understand you, but also are uplifting you, not like crazy irrationally, but they're like uplifting you in a positive way.
Life
Um,
giving, it's just
yeah.
being there for you, that nurturing relationship.
You might be like, I don't know, that's a lot of stuff to think about navigating change or making a decision, but do you want to make a really good decision, or do you want to have to make multiple decisions to fix the first one because you didn't take the time?
Time.
So,
That's a
yeah,
good point. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Gina.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. And
Thank
I'm so
you, Rena.
grateful for taking the time again to
Thank
hop
you.
on. And I'm so grateful sharing such wisdom and your story.
Thank you.
So
It's been a pleasure. I'm so grateful to be able to do that. And I pray blessings over thriving changes and the lives that you touch. Thank you, Rena.